Well, this is Ken and Steve again. This is the opening shot of the movie where we start on the Earth and pull back through an infinity of galactic events. Phenomenon. And a very complicated and a very long complicated shot, which took a tremendous amount of effort by a lot of different people.
We approached this initially as any other Earth to solar system pull-out as seen in other films, and we realized we wanted to get a lot more detailed than you'd seen. We were really using 2001 as our jumping-off point, and we knew that it was going to become much more complicated and time-consuming of a process, but we felt it was worth the effort since this was the opening shot in the movie, and Bob really wanted to give this wow imagery.
What also is very complicated about this shot, and it asks a lot of visual effects, is halfway through this, which is really great idea that Bob had, every sound is cut out and it's just dead silent through the last half of this pull-out. So basically everyone is just staring and scrutinizing every pixel of information in this shot, and you really aren't looking at anything except the effects work. So it had to be right on the money, because if it failed, it would have been a big failure here. And again, like we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of some of the events or things that you haven't seen before. The Oort cloud, this star placement might have been Vega, so we put it here. It could be where the whole sort of crux of the movie is about, is that one blue star that goes by. We go out through here on the Eagle Nebula, which once again is what Carl really wanted to see in the movie. That's really a spectacular formation. It's very unusual. Doesn't that look like a dog on the kind of a wire-haired terrier on the right there, crawling up that part of the galaxy?
It is. It's actually one of the artist's dog. He put it in there. No, he didn't. It took quite a bit of time, probably about 6 to 8 weeks, to actually choreograph this whole sequence. Initially, it was going to be about 90 seconds in length. Ultimately, ended up about 3.5 minutes. Quite a complex animation in terms of not only getting a very subtle motion that was pleasing. You didn't want to blaze through any of these too quickly. You wanted to appreciate all the beautiful imagery that was passing by, but also in terms of knowing what we were up against in terms of how real we needed to get for some of this galactic phenomenon.
And it really had to make you feel the scale of the universe and how huge and how massive it all was, especially in contrast to the moment right here where we pull out of young Ellie's eye. Again, this is a 3D eye that we're coming out of, blending into the real Jenna's eye. And this scene was shot once before where she had blue contacts in her eye, and it made her look like one of the kids, like the Village of the Damned, so we had to reshoot this close-up and just color her eyes later. These are the people that spilled much blood on this shot and many others in the show.
So in preparing to do this sequence, in terms of gathering images, we started with some of the Hubble books that have some absolutely incredible photos of distant galaxies and stars and other interstellar phenomenon. And we laid out what we liked and said, okay, well, how can we pass through some of this? How can we combine it together into something that was visually stunning? We collected first of images from the solar system, views of the planets. Of course, Saturn's ring was something we talked about. How would we play that if we passed through Saturn's ring? What would it look like? Well, what was the contents of Saturn's rings? What was the surface detail on Mars? What did Jupiter look like if we passed right through the big red eye, including its motion?
Is accentuated motion, so it was a little more dramatic. So Jay Red, who is so much into the reality of this, always was fighting us a little bit on that. And this is what you're seeing here is sort of a beginning animatic of the shot. And this is what it looked like. For the longest time, as we were talking to Bob about the speed of different things. So the blue image here is the Earth going away from us.
It's a 3D wireframe or 3D outline of the models that make up the right now the solar system that we're passing through. So
there goes Mars. Here's our asteroid belt. And essentially, this is what was used for timing discussions, what the rhythm of the shot would be for Bob. At the same time, because there was such a crunch on all fronts, this material was being sent up to the sound design guys to see how they wanted to start playing the different bits of information that's playing at the beginning of the shot and how long it was going to go from one transition to the next.
As we left our solar system, we had a little bit more latitude on reality, mainly because we don't know what some of that phenomenon looks like up close. We're passing through the Oort cloud, which is sort of a theoretical cloud of comets that surrounds our galaxy, to which point we only had some basic concept work. We had to figure out how to dimensionalize that, what the Eagle Nebula looks like. Again, we're just sort of taking creative license with that.
I know what the Eagle Galaxy looks like. It looks like Crusader Rabbit. That's what it looks like.
What it would look like if we spin out of our arm of the Milky Way in which we reside, that Magellanic Cloud, the barred galaxy, passing through billions and billions of other galaxies, finally coming to the so-called end of the universe, and then pulling out of the reflection of young Ellie's eye.
Yes, we all did have a breakdown during this shot. That's true.
There were a lot of tools that were employed. We did a lot of the modeling and choreographing in Houdini, Side Effects Houdini. We used particle systems, both in Houdini and Dynamation. Some of the lens flare effects were actually practical stage elements that were touched up as art elements. Some of them were actually just digitally created. The earth textures were complete art elements rendered within Photoshop and then mapped onto a 3D sphere. The light passes the interaction of the sun onto the surface, was rendered using RenderMan. We took a lot of detail photos. We accumulated a lot of detail photos from various Hubble photographs and other NASA photographs to add texture to some of the planet surfaces.
Now I want you to pay close attention here to Mars, because we actually put the face that everyone sees on Mars on this. See if you can find it.
We also made a point of being astronomically correct in terms of adding atmosphere around Mars and Jupiter. You'll see slight blue glow around it, including the polar caps on Mars, things like that we really wanted to pay attention to.
Also, in just a design way, we wanted to make, I just like the look of the flare of the sun kind of laying over everything else. It ties all the separate elements in. There's the face right there. Of course, it really exists, and it is from a race of Martians. We all know that's true. And again, just slowly and painstakingly starting to layer in and test all the different looks that all these moments have to have. So as we start building the asteroid belt, we're trying to figure out what would be a cool way to come through. There's so much dust in the asteroid belt. What's nice is the way it breaks up the sun in the background is a really nice touch.
Jupiter's planets. We wanted to pass by some of the main big planets. We wanted to study how the big red eye on Jupiter would move. We augmented that motion just for interest's sake.
So again, you're seeing just, different, moments of, work in progress. And we would run this by Bob and talk about what we were going to do with it and see if it got his blessing or not. And this is some of the motion tests for the spinning red eye of Jupiter. Early tests that really wasn't working. Of course, that doesn't work at all, but you got to go through things that don't work before you find the one that makes sense.
Again, adding subtleties like the atmosphere around Jupiter and
the moons around Jupiter, which actually it also helps with the scale as it flies by us. When you see a small moon that looks large at the beginning of the shot and suddenly this massive form, looms in from the left.
Now, of course, Saturn is most notable for its rings. The rings are actually fairly narrow, but we wanted to pass through them, and we were talked at great length about what we'd see. Of course, it would be mostly debris, cosmic debris, and some planets in there. We first had to figure out how we would pass through the rings, what was an interesting camera angle through there, and then add in some debris that would look interesting.
That would look debris-like.
Debris-like, yeah. Say something interesting. So this is a theoretical cloud that was based on a piece of concept work that John Lundberg did. John Lundberg is was one of Carl Sagan's primary artists, and in theory there's these comets that surround our solar system, and we wanted to, because of the lighting situation, the sun being recessing off in the distance, we wanted to make it a little bit more interesting. So we came up with this idea of maybe the sundog type of glints, as if you were looking at some sprinklers moving through, with sprinklers with some sunlight moving through it, giving kind of a halo effect.
What the hell are you talking about?
I don't know. I'm making it up.
So these are the stars that may or may not be Vega, and these are the Hubble photographs of the Eagle Nebula that gave us a starting point for the design of what it would look like to pass through this.
Getting the motion, although it's seemingly simplistic motion, was actually quite difficult. You want to, again, not pass through too fast in order to appreciate the imagery that you're passing through. And you don't want to go through too slowly, or you'll never get done with the shot. So sculpting different key shapes within that nebula as 3D geometry, and then using a combination of particle system and pseudo-volumetric rendering tricks to get the gaseous and dust-like artifacts that we would see in the final look of the nebula. And of course, lighting is a key element of making this piece of nebula come to life. Getting the right background lighting, side lighting, key lighting is very difficult to do. A lot of things go wrong.
So it's really just, again, it's layer upon layer. Months and months and months of work are represented here, of people working around the clock trying to piecemeal this all together. And so you look at these dailies every single day, morning, and then in the afternoon we would go around and check stuff out and make your changes, and it was just a constant process that really went also right down to the wire. It took pretty much the whole schedule of the show to get this opening shot done. This is a giant cat hair ball.
This is the Milky Way as we pull out. We're pulling out of our arm of the galaxy. And that's the supposed look of the center of the Milky Way galaxy.
No, this was a Warner Brothers show.
So as we pull out of the Milky Way, there's the Magellanic Cloud, which is a theoretical cloud that exists outside of our galaxy.
Except we put it in the wrong place, but it looked better in the movie this way.
Yeah, we take a lot of creative license, strategically placing pretty pictures. This is the Barred Galaxy. We wanted to pass through this because we felt it was interesting looking. We had to decide how it would look as we passed through from beginning with its mostly just subtle debris into the hot core of the galaxy and then back out. And then we had to round up some distant galaxies, some superclusters of galaxies piled up on top of each other, and put them around our key galaxies as background fill.
And the first galaxies that come in after the Barred have a little more detail, a little more dimension than the latter ones as they start to fly in by the hundreds, because you would never be able to pick up on that kind of subtlety at that point. And also the background has been changing through this whole sequence so that you're seeing more, looks like galactic information way in the distance.
This is one of those classic deep space photos from Hubble. Galaxies piled up on each other. You can kind of see a similarity here. And then, of course, we speed up to get out and pull out through young Ellie's eye.
And so we really had to do a transition from the galaxies to a glint that's in her eye. So we had to go to a sort of a whiteout moment here that turns out to be the glint in her eye. These are some early glint ideas at this point, some of them not too successful. No, 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 we don't like that one. This is the one where we introduced the machine reflection in her eye without the rings, because when the rings were in it, it was too obvious that that's what you were looking at.
That's the real young Ellie, the real glint with her brown eyes. And then a 3D eye. We did the 3D eye mostly because, as you see here, there's such an extreme perspective change as you pull out through the eye that just pushing in on the original photography, it would not hold up. It would start getting soft. You wouldn't see any kind of dimensional shift as we pulled past the eyelashes. So we created a 3D model of the eye, the eyeball and the surrounding eye, and then used the original plate and pasted that over the geometry, and then tracked it to the original camera photography. And then as she blinks when we pull out, we transition to the real plate.
Some of those later shots, too, are the ones you just saw. The blue in her eye was pretty intense. She starts looking sort of like an alien herself. So it took a while to figure out how bright we could play the blue, let you read it, but not overdo it.
Notice the... where is that? How many times Ken said this is crap?
I don't think that's what it says.
We think this is, to date, the longest totally computer-generated shot, being 4,710 frames.
Let's hope we never do another one this long.
Hey, this is the Ken Ralston, Stephen Rosenbaum show of Effects Geekdom. We're going to talk to you today about how we did some of the effect shots on Contact, the motion picture. Here's a scene coming up describing the environment at Hokkaido Island. It's first a ship that Ken Ralston went out and shot on a helicopter of a freighter off of Long Beach in California. We used just the wake of the ship and the water, and then we replaced the entire ship and added in the surrounding environment. Okay, so we started with a plate that was shot of a freighter off the coast of Long Beach in California. Just a plain helicopter moving around a freighter ship. This established the scale of the ship, how it moves through the water, the wake splashing off the ship, and then our objective was to replace most of the ship with the fake ship that we would establish in Hokkaido Island as a command ship for the scene. We started by taking the background plate and digitizing it, bringing it into the computer, and then matching the camera motion from the helicopter move. We would bring it into a software package called Softimage, and then create some dummy 3D objects, which you're seeing here as sort of patchwork, and actually track the motion of the camera. We then had to paint out most of the ship. Since we were replacing it, we were only interested in the water. And then we would create a 3D CG ship and paste it over that. So we had to fabricate some of the water that was behind the ship, as seen here. We then did some procedural matte extractions, pulling out the wake from the ship so that we could place it over the CG ship when we inserted that into the shot.
It's very lovely.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. This represents the almost finished work of the command ship. It was generated in a computer as a three-dimensional model, and then parts of it were animated. You notice antenna moving around, and then we took it into a paint package, Alias Studio Paint, and actually painted on the 3D geometry. Created texture and including stains and subtle details that you would see on a normal ship. We had several passes that we had to generate to put the ship into the scene, which was sort of a late afternoon, early evening, rainy type of environment. So we had to create lights, as seen here. We had to create some background ships. Again, these were just 3D models that were rendered, and then the camera motion was applied to them. We had to generate such subtleties as the background ship's wakes, how they move through the water. There's many layers that go into creating this kind of composite. Besides the 3D ships, there's rain that had to be done in several layers: near rain, mid-ground rain, distant rain, as well as creating the background way off in the distance.
This is the motion control Harrier jet, which was about a 5 or 6 foot long model shot against blue screen, lined up to the CG ship that we were creating, so it would look as if it was landing on top of the landing area on the CG ship. So we have several different passes on this also to help us composite it into the shot.
That's a matte pass.
This was basically, I think, a soft lighting pass in case we needed it to change the lighting as it flew away from us. That's the element for the heat distortion effect, and this is when it lands. This was an element for when it hits the top of the ship. These are our blue screen guys who are wandering around the different areas of the ship, and so they were reduced down to lot and put around the landing area. They're very subtle, but they're down there.
It helps tie realism into the scene when you have extra motion happening on a completely fabricated shot.
There they are, those little buggers. Can barely see them, but they're there. It adds just a little bit of subtle realism.
And again, these are all tracked with the original camera tracking motion that's done at first. And then we shot separate rain elements, near rain, mid-rain, distant rain. This is just out off the camera department parking lot with the wall painted black.
We shot miles of that.
And then placing the elements into the scene, putting the 3D ship with the wake over it, laying rain over it, adding lights to the ship, adding the men walking around, putting the Harrier in, the exhaust blowing off of the Harrier with it interacting, blowing the rain. As the Harrier lands, you'll see it blows up some rain and exhaust off of the deck.
And that was the final composite.
Two of the supervisors on the shot, on this shot, Jerome Chen and Ken Han, hence the Han Chen Maru sign, decided to have a little fun with this.
This was the Busby Berkeley version of this shot, the people diving into the ocean.
There's a lot of detail work that goes unnoticed. There was a lot of preliminary artwork done for the ship design and the whole concept of how this introductory establishing shot for the scene would work. The model shop generating a Harrier, and then the 3D artist generating all the elements that were needed to create this composite.
This is Ken and Steve again. And let's see, what are we talking about? The NASA machine destruction. Crowds react to machine tearing itself apart. Okay, let's see what they're doing, those wacky crowds. This was a group of people, I guess, that we shot in Florida near Cape Canaveral, that we were going to put a machine in the distance blowing up and coming apart. So luckily, we got a great casting call that day and got a lot of great folks out there in their cars. So we had them reacting, screaming over a loudspeaker system when to, act as if the machine's blowing up. This, I believe, is our sky element that we decided to add into the shot without the machine. Because the sky was pretty boring that day, we wanted to make it more interesting.
Whether it's gray or sunny, we still want to do something with the sky to make it more beautiful.
Especially when it's such a key scene in the movie. So now we have our sky and our people doing the duck and cover. Don't look too close, some people are laughing. Now we start layering in the machine coming apart again. This was animated by Eric Armstrong and some of the guys in his department. You can start to see the rough placement of some of the pieces where they'll fall into the ocean, and then we have to add impact points for when that happens. Some of these splashes were shot to be used in different parts of the movie. Some of them were used in the ship scenes. High-speed, large splashes, that splashed up about 20 feet. Those were reduced down and put into the impact areas on some of the larger pieces of debris that hit into the ocean. This was also shot on the same night we did the rain for the ship and a lot of other elements that we had to shoot against a black background.
A very wet night.
And we shot a variety of speeds, and then we could look at the film the next day and see which one we wanted to use. So now you can see the water starting to get layered in to where the pieces hit. And we could see if it was working for us, if the size was correct. Here's some dust elements that were shot blowing up for a lot of different moments during this destruction scene. And this was shot on the Culver lot. This is the mat for the dust, so we could mat it on top of the background elements.
We'll shoot these a lot of times at high speed to help the scale. These are relatively small explosions done on the stage. Shooting them at high speed helps give the realism of larger scale.
And this is just a variety of different types of atmospheric effects that need to all be layered in to make sense out of the shot. And different materials too. There's Fuller's Earth, there's something called, there was like a chalk material that we used, diatomaceous earth. I'm not sure if we used that.
And a lot of liquid nitrogen and other stuff. A lot of upfront thinking has to go on as to what type of elements you need. We choreograph out some of the basic motions and the camera angles, and then you really, when you go to these stage shoots, you have to figure out, okay, I want this splash to go that direction, I want this dust explosion to go that direction, and you try to cover as much of the angles as possible. This was, I had some guys line up along the side of this pool. This was in the middle of the desert, throwing rocks in here because I wanted little debris hits splashing into the water, and well, what better way than just having rocks thrown into a pool? We just would pull those off of the water surface. This was roughly the camera angle I needed, and we would just place them right into the scene for that appropriate shot.
Now you can see them in the background starting to get layered in there, some of the smaller hits. That's from the stuff that they just did. And then this was some pyrotechnics that were shot out at the same location at high speed, different explosions, and some of those were shrunk way down so it would look like it was in the distance and matted on top of and behind some of the sections of the machine. There was a variety of explosions that were shot, and then we would go through the film and pick out the ones we wanted to use, put them in the computer, and then reduce them down and then place them where we wanted to use them.
Often when you're shooting these stage elements, you sometimes can expose as much as 10, 15,000 feet. I think on some of the rain we shot almost as much as 20,000 feet. Let me tell you, it's exciting to watch 20,000 feet of rain, of which you usually end up with about, 50 feet of it in the film.
This is a reel showing you how some of the shots came together in the high-speed compositing part of the show. High-speed compositing is essentially another digital compositing tool where we piece different scenes together like a picture puzzle. It just is a little faster and a little more interactive and real time when you're working with it. Some of the other computer techniques take a lot longer and you don't see immediate results. Sitting down with Mark or some of the other high-speed compositing folks like Sheena Dougal and the rest, you can actually work out shots in a sitting instead of having to wait days to see results and see what you're doing.
So you begin by, in compositing, what you're doing is you're laying together several elements or shots, separate backgrounds and foreground pieces, often using mats. You're either pulling a mat off of a blue screen or you're actually drawing around, articulating a mat, and then you're using that to paste it either behind or in front of another photographic element. Sometimes the elements are not photographic at all. They're generated within the computer either by painting or taking existing stills and doctoring them up, or just creating them completely within as a three-dimensional element. So a lot of these scenes, for example, on the beach, Jody and David Morris were shot in a blue screen. We would use a proprietary technique to pull a mat on them, including every strand of hair, so that we could place the background behind them.
Without them being transparent. That's the main reason for a mat, is you just don't want to have the background bleeding through the foreground, so the mat blocks out the background from bleeding through. And here again, it's very fast techniques for placing in the artwork that we created for the sky. You can do some real fast checks on color, how it blends in with the background. And here we are back at the mirror shot, which again uses a lot of different compositing techniques and some 3D cheats you can do in the high-speed system. When the mirror closes towards the end, Mark really created the bevel mirror look, which didn't exist on it at all, and had to do some match move work on that and some fake sort of warping of the image instead of actual three-dimensional perspective shifts. It's a cheat when you warp some of the different perspectives around just to imply that that's what's going on. And here you can see the background element and the foreground element together and how they had to be stuck together. The blue screen in the mirror, once again, gives us an opportunity to pull mats of the foreground young Jenna easier than if it was black or any other color in there.
In the example of this machine, we had to put a three-dimensional element underneath Jody and the pod, the foreground set piece. We had to often create the flooring or other pieces that need to go into it. So you can create as many as 30, 40, 50 different layers that need to be put into the scene. You use blue screen often to help you start with matting and then build on that.
And this was, again, other techniques is a lot of the match move techniques that are used to put in artwork that's created, artwork of the machine, artwork of the helicopters. The Inferno has a great match move software, and it just makes it easier in placing in images that are false into real backgrounds.
Here you would see the command ship environment was shot out the window entirely. Blue screen allowed us to pull a mat on the action that was happening in the foreground and put the background environment into it.
And here again is a lot of compositing tricks with blending, different models of the pod and water splashes and a lot of different elements. And really all these sequences are the same. Everything you're seeing is multiple layers of material to make you believe what's happening, because it takes a lot of different material to do the subtle blending. It's like with Clinton here, he was taken from a press conference thing that he did. He didn't have the right suit on compared to the earlier stuff that was used in the sequence, so we had to change all of the color and the tie patterns on it, put our actors in. And again, it's just like a large picture puzzle. You figure out what your final image wants to be, you discuss it with the director, you pre-plan like crazy because there is no happy accidents in the world of computers generally. It's not like shooting stuff practically where sometimes you have nice, wonderful serendipity, things that just happen that are magical that you can use. you have to plan strategically for that feel, because it's a very complicated design trick to sort of come up with these moments that are sort of inspired and magical and make it feel spontaneous in the world of digital, because it has to be pre-planned to death. And that's a real trick.
Here's an example of the blue screen floor we had to deal with in the Hokkaido machine. The various layers we had to create, the smoke, the rings that move around, the machine below, the water below that.
It's really like, in a way, it's like an oil painting. You start roughing something in, and it takes layers and layers of paint and material to get that final image that's what you want everyone to see, where it finally is, you pull it off. And it takes months, and it takes a lot of patience.
Another use that we discovered in realizing these sets before they were built was we had the amazing ability of figuring out, well, what wallpaper would look good, what wood textures, what carpeting, and then we could try and match that once we got a flavor and a feel that we really liked, and then it would be added to the actual set piece, as well as any dimension changes that we might realize when we put a camera in the computer model. One of the things that we also did, besides building the machine, was to take blueprints for the sets and do kind of a realization of them so we could see what they were going to look like before they were built and make any changes. And this is an example of that. You also get a good view of the backing out the window and the machine sitting out there on the Florida. My name is Tim Wilcox, and I was the 3D computer graphic artist on Contact. In correlation with the beauty stills that we took of Machine Hokkaido, kind of at the end of this whole process, decided it would be really fun to do somewhat of a helicopter flyover of this machine to really show off its scope and kind of also have some fun and do an animation of it. And this is the product of that. So we're going to kind of do a whole climb up here to give you an idea of how high you actually are up, and really to the detail of the design of this structure. And we're doing a pass right now over the crane, and you can see the bridge spans and the whole structure that would allow the crane to move. This is the walkway that she comes down through to go to the pod, and this is the exterior of the room where the pod is. It drops from here, and we kind of get an idea of the distance between the equatorial ring and the crane. We then kind of do a turn, and we're going to fly back through the middle of it. Again, just kind of showing off the size of it and giving us a good feel of what a helicopter ride might be. A little bit accelerated helicopter ride, but a helicopter ride through the entire structure of this device. And we kind of pull back to see the whole thing put together.
Detection of an unidentified radio source from deep space can neither be confirmed nor denied.
Whatever it is, it ain't local.
Position?
I checked interferometry somewhere in Lyra, I think.
Vega?
Can't be. It's only 26 light years away.
I want all these people out of here. Your having sent this announcement all over the world may well constitute a breach of national security.
Boy, this isn't a person-to-person call. This may be an announcement to get our attention.
The president's called an emergency meeting.
You know those interlaced frames that we thought were noise? This says structure.
I'm going to recommend to the president that we militarize this project immediately.
There's no reason to believe that their intentions are hostile.
There's no proof of that.
Why don't they just speak English?
Mathematics is the only truly universal language, Senator. Buried within the message itself is the key to decoding it.
Those look like engineering schematics, almost like blueprints.
It is our belief that the message contains instructions for building some kind of machine.
A machine?
It might turn out to be some kind of a transport.
Transport? The fact is, you don't know what it does. It could be anything.
Nobody's saying this isn't dangerous.
They're gonna build it.
Who gets to go, though?
It's complicated, Ellie.
Who gets to go?
By doing this, you're willing to risk your life. You're willing to give your life and die for this. Why?
Detection of an unidentified radio source from deep space can neither be confirmed nor denied.
Whatever it is, it ain't local.
Position? It's only 26 light years away.
Your having sent this announcement all over the world may well constitute a breach of national security.
Boy, this isn't a person-to-person call. This may be an announcement to get our attention.
The president's called an emergency meeting.
I'm going to recommend to the president that we militarize this project immediately.
There's no reason to believe that their intentions are hostile.
There's no proof of that.
Why don't they just speak English?
It is our belief that the message contains instructions for building some kind of a transport.
Transport? The fact is, you don't know what it does.
Nobody's saying this isn't dangerous.
They're gonna build it.
Who gets to go?
By doing this, you're willing to risk your life. You're willing to give your life and die for this. Why?